And we will be focusing on what can be innovative ways and tools for improving access to justice for the displaced communities, and specifically amongst survivors of gender-based violence. What can be the tools through which they can access justice better? And again, as I said, we draw a lot from our experiences, but it doesn't represent our program fully, just to be clear on that. This is something which we believe can work and has been successful. We will be sharing some stories with you as we go. We are also hoping and expecting it to be an interactive session. We have prepared a few questions so that we can keep communicating, because we would love to hear what you all think about the certain ideas we're going to present. So that's us in a nutshell. And the way we have divided our presentation today is into two segments. The first part talks about community-based volunteers, which I will be covering, which leads us to use of digital tools, which basically would stem from where I would leave the presentation and hand it over to Radhika, and she will talk about use of digital tools, not just in the community, but even at the level of courts, which became a reality during the pandemic in most of the countries. So that is how we will go forward with our presentation today. All right, so we will start with a basic question, which we wanted your responses to, which would help us take the conversation further about access to justice in general. And I will hand it over to Radhika just after I read this question. So the question is like, because the presentation and the whole event focuses on access to justice, I think it's important for us to start off this conversation by discussing what justice means to all of us, because it is a concept. It is not really defined in very concrete terms anywhere. So we were hoping if you could all in the chat box write one word that you can think of in relation to the concept of justice. And I'll hand it over to Radhika to take it further. Yeah, so just in the chat box, if you could just type out one word which you think, which comes to your mind when somebody says justice. Okay.
So while you guys will be writing down words, I will be putting them on a word cloud. And that way, at the end of this icebreaker activity, we'll be able to have a visual representation to what everyone in this room means by justice. And it's okay if you repeat words, because that'll show us where, our ideas of justice intersect and where our ideas of justice are unique. So we really request you to participate. Any word, if you can think of more than one word that you associate with justice, that will be really helpful to us. So I've started off, I've written the word holistic, and why don't you all go ahead?
It can even be a phrase. It doesn't have to be one word strictly. Okay, we got one more response. Thank you, Ed. I mean, it's honestly not very easy, I realized, when we were thinking of this presentation, because we use the word very, loosely a lot of times. We talk about justice all the time. But what exactly it is and how we can actually define it is something which varies from context to context. I know it is very contextual as well. I think I'm going to put that word here from my end, contextual. It's okay if you can think of more than one word also. Thank you. We have some more responses. I think we'll take 2-3 minutes more for you all to put in your responses. And it would have been nice if we had enough time to even go over the room and get everyone else's introductions. It would be nice to know where everyone else is coming from. Do we have lawyers in the room? Or okay, yeah, that's interesting. Thank you. Any other inputs? Okay, thank you. Right. Okay, I think we can take it from here. If there are no further inputs, then we'll, Radhika, you want to share your word cloud? Yeah. Okay, I'll need to stop sharing my screen for that. Okay, I'm just going to hand over the screen sharing to Radhika. So, the screen is a little, it's not like it's getting cut. You can keep adding words in chat if you can think of more. It's fine. Okay, yeah, this is fine. Thanks, Radhika. So, okay, so these were some of the words that you all shared, like the words that came to your mind when somebody says the word justice. So there's non-discrimination, there is contextual, impartiality, fairness, treatment, violence. I think some of the words got scattered, but I think it was impartial, holistic, fair, equity, morality. Wow. Okay. Thank you. Thanks everyone for your inputs. And from here, what I would like to say is that justice is a very interesting concept in the sense it's hard to define. And yet it is something which we all keep working towards as lawyers, as activists, as social workers. So it's interesting to, Radhika, I need to share my screen now. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So the reason I wanted us to have this discussion is so that I can take you all to this quote, which says, it is said that while it may be difficult to agree about what justice is, we find it easier to identify injustice. And in this way, we work our way from human wrongs to human rights. And this was said to us in one of our classrooms, actually, by late Professor Haynes. He unfortunately passed away last year. And this is something which is known as the struggle theory of human rights, which explains access to justice in a very interesting way. It talks about injustice before it talks about justice, because justice, the way this theory sees it, is justice is like a process which takes us from something which we know is not right to something which is right. So justice is just a process. It's a very fluid concept. It keeps changing from context to context. It keeps changing from time to time. What's justice today will not look like justice 100 years from now. And also what looks like justice in India might not look like justice in Scandinavian countries. Like, so it just keeps changing for each context. And if the concept of justice changes, the concept of access to justice also changes, because if the concept of justice itself is not universal, then the access to justice concept can also not be universal. And that is where what we're going to talk about today comes into context, which is access to justice. When we talk about SGBV survivors, gender-based violence survivors, and specifically gender-based violence survivors in displaced communities. By displaced communities, I mean people who are undocumented, who could be migrant workers, who could be refugees, people who don't find any boxes to tick in forms when their identity is being questioned. So access to justice in context of these communities and what it means to them, and how can the access to justice be easier for them? How can it be what it would mean to them to begin with? And as I said in the beginning, we would be dividing it in two segments. First is community volunteers, and second is digital tools. So I will start with the concept of community-based volunteers. But before that, it is important to understand the context, the social legal context of the communities that we are going to be touching upon, because of course, as I said, it would vary from place to place, time to time. So we work in India, and our there is no clear legal framework for the rights of displaced communities in India. There are no specific laws which identify them, which even gives us proper statistics for them. So there's no way to even find out how many people we are talking about here. For refugees, UNHCR can give us data. For example, at the moment, there are about around 50,000 refugees which are registered with UNHCR. But for the internal displaced communities, the internal migrants, there's no way to find out the real statistics. But it won't be wrong to say that the number will go in millions. These communities obviously have very limited documentation. So when I say that, it means that they don't have identity proofs which would be acceptable in courtrooms, for example, or which the police would be able to accept from them. There's also limited access to institutions and authorities due to various reasons. It could be physical access, because they could be in remote areas where there are no actual institutions they can approach. And there could be non-physical barriers, such as feeling intimidated by authorities, or because of lack of documentation, them not even being identified or acknowledged in the system of the country. And also, this affects their access to formal legal remedies, because when a community is not identified or is not acknowledged by the database of a country, then your access to legal remedies automatically goes down. And then another context which we would keep touching upon and which would become more important when we talk about digital tools in the second segment is the impact of COVID on access. Because most of our programs across the world these days do factor in the fact that that it is an unpredictable world. We can be hit by things like COVID and other pandemics anytime, which would restrict our physical access to institutions, to services. So it's important to factor in that unpredictability in terms of physical access, and the impact it has on communities, especially in SGBV context. When we talk about cases of domestic violence, which I will in some time, what is the impact of COVID on the situation, as well as the support services that are available. Coming to our first segment of the presentation, the community-based volunteers. Community-based volunteers is basically a system of tailored access to justice. Because again, what we believe is, as I said in the beginning, that justice does not mean the same thing for everyone. And as I explained, that it's sometimes difficult for even for people to even access physical institutions and as well as non-physical access is limited due to various reasons. We need to explore the alternative methods. We need to explore not just alternate justice, what justice could mean for certain communities, but also alternate routes to justice. So it's important to understand what justice means to each community. It's important to understand what challenges each community will face while accessing not just institutions, as well as the justice, the way they define it, as well as understanding what could be the results when these tools are accessed by the communities. So this is more of a bottom to top approach, where where the community themselves identify all these aspects of justice and are able to then reach to that level where they can access it. So for that, it's important that there are volunteers from within the community, people who can actually, who are more active, who have the time, who have the resources to become active within the community, who can be empowered to help the community in the sense for them to be able to identify the violence they are facing, or even acknowledge that if there is violence, there can be help provided to them. So that's where community-based volunteers come in, rather than people going from outside and telling them, what to do, where to go. It's important that something comes from within the community, and that is what we feel is very essential in sectors which are sensitive, not just in the sense that it's when we're talking about gender-based violence, it's a sensitive issue. But when we're talking about displaced communities, as we said, it could be a politically sensitive area. It could be lack of understanding of the laws of the country. So that's where community-based volunteers can be effective, and that is what we'll be talking about. So who can be the community-based volunteers? Like, who are these people that I'm talking about? Community-based volunteers are people from the communities who volunteer, as like that's self-explanatory. Basically, there could be public-spirited people who want to help others around them. It could be people who are already equipped, such as people who in India we call the paralegal volunteers, who are a lot of times they are law students, or they are even graduates who want to get some basic legal understanding of the rights of the people around them, and they want to then further help their community that they live in. So those paralegal volunteers can be community-based volunteers. They can be community health workers whose job is to provide health services to communities. They are usually from the community. They're women who are from the community. Those can be community-based volunteers. It could be young people. It could be old people. For sexual and gender-based violence cases specifically, it could be women volunteers who can be identified, who can be further trained. So the next question is, how do you identify them? And the answer to that is that usually it's like a snowball effect, right? You start with a community, you identify one person who is able to reach out to a lot of other people who other people feel comfortable with, and that one person can connect you to more people who can become those volunteers. So it's usually a snowballing effect, but it's always good to find people who are resourceful, who already have some basic understanding, who already have some basic sensitization towards the specific issue that you want to work on. What can their roles be? That basically, that's kind of covered in what I said just now. Their main role is to be the first line of response for any issue, like for this issue, for sexual and gender-based violence cases. The community-based volunteers would be the first line of response for gender-based violence survivors in the community. The survivors will be able to reach out to the volunteers, who would be able to make referrals for example, who would be able to connect them to the support services that are available in the area. They'll be able to identify what are the rights that the person has in that particular situation. And also the person would be able to identify the violence to begin with, right? Like, will be able to identify the survivors in the community, which itself is a challenge for an outsider or an organization that knows nothing about the community. And the next question that we face is, how do you equip the volunteers for these roles? Because when you are dealing with sexual and gender-based violence cases, the first thing that comes up is that these the survivors have to be dealt with in a trauma-informed manner. So it's important to train these volunteers in trauma-informed approaches, how to counsel somebody in a trauma-informed manner, to explain to them what trauma means, what the survivor has gone through, and what can be the expected challenges that the volunteer will face while providing support to the survivors, right? So these kind of basic trainings need to be provided in addition to some basic legal provisions of the country. What are the rights that the person has? Like, she has a right to speak to a woman police officer, for example, some very basic things. And in addition to that, it's important that the volunteers are well aware about the non-conventional justice mechanisms, like the informal structures that might be available in the community, because that, especially in sexual and gender-based violence, those are the first recourse for any survivor to not go to the police and to try to access the informal structures, which is something which we don't have the time to get into too much. But at the end of this presentation, we will discuss a little bit about the informal justice mechanisms. So because the person is from the community, it's easier for them to access those structures as well and to connect the survivor to those services. And lastly, the most important thing is, how do you incentivize the community volunteers? Why would they do that? And here the most important thing, something which we have learned while we have done this program, is for each volunteer, it's important to understand and identify what their ambitions are, how they connect with the world, how they see they can bring in the change, and support them to do that. So, for example, if it's a law student who's a community-based volunteer, the person wants to become a lawyer, you support the person, you provide mentorship to these volunteers so that they can achieve what they want for themselves in their lives. So you incentivize them by empowering them to do what their ambitions are, to be a more effective volunteer. What do they need? What is their motivation to even start off in this area? So to identify each person's motivations and ambitions is very important here, because when you're doing something voluntarily, it's important that you connect with them at an individual level and provide what they need to grow further in whichever line they want to pursue their own ambitions. Some of the basic benefits, like why is it better than the other forms of providing services or providing the first line of counseling? The first and foremost thing is improved community readiness, which means that when you have people providing first line of counseling who are from the community itself, they would know what the readiness level of the community is to receive certain support services. To give you an example, in cases of gender-based violence, for a big section of society, there is an understanding that if there is a domestic violence case, for example, the wife would not want to continue living with that man anymore. She would want a divorce. She would want to be separated. She would not want to live in that abusive relationship anymore. But for each community, that understanding is different, right? Like there are communities which would want to like divorce is a taboo is a social taboo in most of the communities. So you wouldn't want to do that. So what is the level of readiness for each community to receive certain services? What is the first remedy that a woman would want in a domestic violence case would vary from community to community. And the community-based volunteers are obviously better in touch with those realities of the community, and they will be able to provide the right service to them. They would be able to provide the right counseling to them. Effective implementation of informal dispute resolution mechanisms, I already covered that. Because they are a part of that community, they would be more familiar with what those mechanisms are, how to access them, which an outsider organization might not. They might have very conventional ways of approaching these instances of violence. Promotion of help-seeking behavior. So when people from your neighborhood, your family, your friend circle are volunteering into something like this, it does promote a sense of responsibility. It promotes a sense of it promotes the help-seeking behavior in the community, in the sense it makes people feel that if there's something wrong happening, I should seek help. That itself is a big step for a lot of people, because a lot of times, a lot of forms of violence are normalized, a lot of forms of abuse is normalized in a context. And so to promote that help-seeking behavior is like when you see people you can relate to, who are approachable to you, are providing that help, then you find that help more accessible. Increased trust, individualized care and assistance. That's self-explanatory, so I won't go much into it. Local to local approach. As I said, I mean, it is something which people around you are offering. It's something which is more in tune. It's not tone deaf, which a lot of efforts can be when they are kind of conventional, or they are not in touch with the realities of the community. Less hostility towards efforts. There's also less resistance to your efforts in the community when it is being provided by the people you know, by the people you can relate to. It doesn't feel like an outsider effort, because it's not. And again, improved accessibility, which is a constant theme of our presentation here, that of course it does improve accessibility in terms of physical access as well as psychological access, feeling safe, feeling heard, and feeling understood by the people you're seeking help from. So that is these are some of the benefits of community-based volunteers, which we have found to be very useful in our program while providing services to survivors of sexual and gender-based violence, specifically from displaced communities. And while working with these communities during COVID times, we realized that when it's not possible to go from door to door, when the physical spaces were shrinking during the pandemic, we wanted to explore the digital tools to be for these services to be available, for these community-based volunteers even to reach out to not just the communities, but also to the external service providers. And that is what takes us to our next segment, which is digital tools to strengthen access to justice to SGBV survivors. And for that, I will pass on the mic to my co-presenter, Radhika, to take you through it. Thank you.
Hello, is my screen visible?
Yeah.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Tanima, for that very informative presentation. I am very excited to be here today with everyone, and I will be taking you to the second part of the presentation and to the second innovative strategy that we will be talking about, that is digital tools. My presentation will focus on how we can use digital tools to strengthen access to justice for GBV survivors or gender-based violence survivors. And I will cover what these digital tools are, why is it necessary to even think of using digital tools in such a situation, and most importantly, what are the basic systems and structures we need in place to ensure that digital systems and digital tools can actually be inclusive and actually allow us to include communities who have so far not been included when we think of ideas like digital justice. So I'm excited to get started. I'm going to start off with why digital tools. Now, as somebody who has been providing legal aid for the past year and a half, I realized early on that the biggest challenges I faced were not, big questions of law or like how the law discriminates against women or how there is inadequacy of law, even though those are big challenges. The biggest challenge I really faced was, how do I make sure my client can reach my office? Will my client be able to find where I am? Will she be able to travel from so far away? How will I get a document signed? And it was these very small logistical and practical issues that really really cause delay in the provision of legal aid, especially when you are working with a community that is marginalized, like displaced survivors often are. So, and there are many reasons for that, right? So for the first thing is that very often where the way many cities are designed is that people who are living in communities or people like community members are often living in places that are very far from centers of law. So from where lawyers stay, from where courts are, and which means that very often they would have to travel long distances to be able to even access to meet a lawyer even one time, or to sign a document, which is something that happens very often in the filing process. The geographical issue is then the geographical issue then becomes compounded by the fact that there are also financial constraints. This means that many of our clients are actually daily wage laborers. So for that, for them, if you have to travel to a court or travel to a lawyer's chamber, it means not only missing an entire day of work, which becomes very hard because for them, they rely on daily wages to survive day to day, or it could also mean finding the money to really travel that large distance. So like I said, it was really challenging. It continues to be very challenging, to have, to ensure that these logistical issues are resolved and your client is able to get the access to court or access to lawyer or to a health provider, as and when they need it. And finally, as lawyers, we know that there are huge time constraints that we have. And if you end up dealing with these logistical challenges, what ends up happening is that cases from the marginalized community go on the bottom of your pile because there's so much to coordinate and so much to do. And so if you notice what happens when clients are interacting, where lawyers are interacting with their other clients, is that we've seen a very natural transition to using of digital tools. So for example, I could email an affidavit to a client, they could download it, or they could even digitally sign it and send it back to me. Or otherwise, I could just get on a call with them or a Zoom call with them and provide them online consultation or legal consultation. This very natural progression to provide to digital tools is not happening with communities that are marginalized, with displaced communities who don't have digital capacities. And this came into sharp focus when the pandemic hit. And this is something that Tanima also referred to. And, so we're going to be discussing that a little bit more in detail. So what happened during the pandemic was that on one hand, there was an increase in the cases and instances of GBV, that was gender-based violence, or what is known as a shadow pandemic. A lot more women were reporting that they were facing violence within their homes, in particular because we were all in lockdown. And simultaneously, the ability of civil society and NGOs to access these women, to tell them that we are here, that we have these services, that you can seek help, and to even provide services was diminishing. Because most people did not have access to communities. We did not have systems in place that would allow women to call us through a helpline number or be able to provide online counseling, in order to address their needs. And so what happened after the pandemic was that there was this emerging consensus that even if in the future, our access to communities, our access to personally going to the communities is disrupted. We need to make sure that there is some ability we have to have some presence in the community, and also to be able to connect, to be able to provide services to women from a remote perspective. And so this was, I think, a big push that led to the idea of digital tools gaining prominence. And finally, I think the importance of digital tools can be understood when you see it in context of the nature of what providing access to service is. So when you are providing access to services to a survivor of GBV, you're not only, connecting them to one person, but in fact, many professionals are involved. So there could be a doctor involved, there could be a psychosocial counselor involved, there could be a lawyer involved, there could be a caseworker involved. And so this is also the idea of justice as a holistic idea of justice, where you want to ensure that all of their needs are fulfilled. And so in order to do that, it becomes much easier if the information that the client needs to share is shared at one place. And then with that consent, you're able to send it to whoever else needs it to provide them service, or to make what we call referrals, which means that the benefit of this is that clients do not get re-traumatized, because they don't have to go to each person and repeat their story again, or and so to that extent, it's really important that even caseworkers start to use some sort of online tools like case management systems, etc., to be able to really provide legal aid and to be able to help them in their provision of legal aid. So now that brings me to what I mean by digital tools and what I will be focusing on today. So I've chosen 3 different tools, the first being a mobile application, or what we call app. Now, this is the only one that is client-facing, in the sense that this is a tool that clients could be using. The second option is the case management system. A case management system is something that caseworkers or lawyers who are providing services to women will be using, to store all the necessary information of the client, and then with their consent, share it with other service providers. And finally, there is an e-filing system, or by what I mean by this is like a systemic change where you're able to bring, you're able to digitize the judiciary system from going to being dependent on paper to become paperless, and to be able to have access, go to e-hearings, do e-filings, and things that will allow that clients don't have to go to court constantly. So now I just want to quickly go into detail about what I mean by apps. So an app can include, many features, as we know. And so an app that helps women access justice, and especially survivors of violence access justice, could have 2 components. So one, it could have a section which will give them information on what their rights are, what crimes are, what, for example, what sexual harassment is, what rape is, what domestic violence is, and also what the laws that protect them are. It could also connect them to a variety of government schemes that will help them access, for example, if they are pregnant, if there are government schemes that help them access to funds when they are pregnant. So it could also give them important information like that. And the second is when you actually put them in touch with service providers. So that is like providing them details of which lawyer is there in their community, which doctor will be able to help them in their community. And so to give them this important information on their phones itself. So that's what I mean by digital tools. And, I will be in going ahead, I will be talking more about them. So, but now is a really good time to say that in an ideal world, these tools would make my job really easy, would make our job as lawyers very easy. But as things stand right now, digital tools actually need a lot of work to be able to be inclusive and to actually ensure that the shift to an online system, a remote case service delivery system, doesn't exclude marginalized populations. And so what I want to discuss are some of the challenges that arise out of using digital tools and how we can begin to address them. You will notice that some of these challenges cannot be addressed by any individual organization alone. And so in that sense, this presentation is forward seeking about what it is that we can wish for in the future if we want digital systems to be inclusive. So the first and most important challenge is the lack of digital literacy and digital infrastructure. By this, we mean that a large population, at least in India, is not able to either access smartphones or even if they have access to smartphones, not able to use smartphones, to easily navigate on it, or to be able to even read enough to be able to understand what is written on a smartphone and how you're able to use it. So this is what we call digital literacy. But in a much larger sense, there's also a problem of infrastructure, in the sense of a lack of telecom infrastructure in many marginalized communities, right? Because there could not be consistent data service, there could not be consistent network, no access to internet. So it's really important that any society that is trying to think of moving to a digital future actually ensures that there is equal access to digital infrastructure at all levels of society. Now, the last challenge, the one that I spoke about telecom infrastructure, it's very unlikely that a single organization will actually be able to make an impact on that. But as an organization, there's a lot we can do to address the lack of digital literacy and the lack of smartphones. So many programs, for example, have a component of a direct, benefit transfer, where this could mean providing cash to the community, or it could mean some other form of direct benefit transfer. So what we've seen is that you can also provide like smartphones to members in the community. So you can either identify barefoot volunteers or paralegal volunteers who are in need of smartphones, and then actually provide them with it, and ensure that they train everybody else around them to use this. And so there is emerging literature on the transformative impact of providing community members with smartphones, and how that ends up snowballing into a lot more positive effects through all levels of their house, of their community. And so that's one thing that that organizations can think of doing. But the other thing is that whatever app that you're creating, you need to make sure that the app has multiple languages, so that community members who are not proficient in one language can use other languages to access this. And secondly, you need to have a lot of audio-visual material, which means that because many people can't read, their low literacy rates in general, it's important that they are able to hear the information, so that their lack of reading ability or lack of literacy does not affect their ability to access these services. Also, you should have a lot of visual cues that help them understand, what something is saying, what something refers to. And I'll show you an example of this later on. The second thing I wanted to talk about is what we've seen is that very often, even if a woman has access to a phone, it is often that she does not have control over the phone, and nor does she have any privacy, which means that, for example, her husband could be using the phone, and her children could be using the phone. And if you're making an app that helps women who are in violent situations, it is very important that the people around them, the perpetrators, don't know that she is seeking help, because that could lead to the violence getting more intense. And if for example, a perpetrator found out that their victim is actually trying to seek help, that could increase the violence that she faces. So what we've seen apps do is that they have something called a safety mode, which is that, for example, the app could, in its normals, in normal times, could be a weather app, or it could be something like a calendar or something nondescript. And if you were to long press a particular icon, then that could turn into an app that actually helps women and actually has information for women who are in abusive situations. So there are lots of creative ways to make sure that having a digital tool, having an app doesn't actively or negatively impact the survivor we are trying to help. Third, I want to talk about data protection. So a lot of countries, the country we work in, for example, has very poor data protection laws, which means that there's a general tendency that people will be collecting more data, as much data as they can, and then selling that data, profiting from that data. So if you're an organization, if you are trying to think of how to use digital tools, or how to create a digital tool that is inclusive, it's important that you work with an app developer who understands the social goals of the app they're trying to create, which means not collecting information that's not necessary, not collecting information that could be used to personally identify the woman. So, for example, in the app that we have, we wanted to collect information about the geographical location of the client, so we could give them services or connect them to services to people who are around them. And now, if, for example, so what we did to that end is that even though we collected the location, we did not store it with any information that could be connected to the person itself. So the information about the location was not stored with their phone number or their IP address. So there was no way to understand who these, whose information it was or whose location it was. So what is known as disaggregated data or anonymized data. So it's really important that, these things are also thought through, and you're able to create an app that protects the privacy of the people you're trying to help. And in the absence of, data protection laws, it's going to be on the organization. It's going to be on the people trying to create the app to actually to do something like that. Okay, and finally, this is not a structural issue, but this is an issue that is a little bit more behavioral. So what happens is that when you're trying to help a client to seek help for something as sensitive as sexual and gender-based violence, that person needs a lot of individual attention, which is what Tanwa was talking about. A lot of trust needs to be built. So it's very, it's yet to be seen if women who are seeking help find that trust or find that information coming from an app or a digital tool useful. And so this is an ongoing challenge, something that we will need to work on. And one way to address it is that, to have trained caseworkers who are able to then, for example, either train women on, or to be able to support the use of the app with these women. So one example, and this also goes into how you provide counseling online. So an example that I wanted to share is that, when you are trying to provide legal aid, it's really important that you're able to create a space that is, trustworthy, a space that is not judgmental. And if I were providing somebody legal aid in person, it would be easy to use non-verbal cues like facial expressions or body language to create that sympathy or trust. But when you're going to be talking to a client over the phone, it's more complicated than that, because then you have to actively state sentences like, I understand what you're going through, or, I think you're very courageous for coming out. And that requires additional training because it doesn't come very naturally to caseworkers, especially who are used to doing physical or, who are used to doing in-person counseling. And so that's just a thought also about how caseworkers need to be trained to use digital tools to provide remote services, and something that organizations will have to think about. So to conclude, what I just wanted to say was that, when you're trying to create an app that is inclusive, it's not just about the final product, it's also about the process. So these challenges that we were able to identify, we were able to do so because when we were trying to build an app, we had a lot of focus group discussions with community members, with women who we wanted to help with this app. And they were able to point out a lot of these issues that wasn't on our mind. So while this was true for India, another context could have a lot more different challenges. It could have a lot other things that we need to be kept in mind. And so I think the message is that the process has to be as thought out, as inclusive as the ultimate outcome in order to have a positive app that actually helps women. So I wanted to quickly show you the app that, just to give you an idea of what we meant. So as you can see, we've divided it in a know your rights component, which is information. So here this app has information about sexual harassment in the workplace. It's done in a really chat, like in the manner of a chat, so that, women are used to this kind of information, like talking on WhatsApp, things like that. So you're able to really get this information in an easy format. As you can see over here, if you were to click on any of this information, this app will read it out to you. So, you don't need to be literate to be able to use it. You just need to be able to click on it and you can actually hear the app in the language that you want. Here, there are access to some government schemes. So you can see that an icon like this, where there's a pregnant woman, will allow a woman to understand what the scheme is related to. And so, use of audio-visual material to help women understand, to help them be more digitally literate when using the app. The second thing is service delivery. So here you can see that we have, so it takes a location. So wherever you are, it then is able to show you who are the service providers around you. And, you can divide it in terms of legal, support, and medical. And so support could include things like shelter, it could include things like psychosocial counseling, and you color code it correctly and differently so that it's easy to understand that the red is the support, yellow is legal, and all you need to do is click on one of them and a box like this will open up. that will then give you important information about who they are, who you will be speaking to, who your, what phone number they have, what the email ID is, and where the address is. And so this information then just becomes so easy for a woman to access because it's on her phone. She'll be carrying it with her everywhere. And, if you have a volunteer even who can do this, then they can share this information with other women in their community because it just becomes so easy to provide this information. So this was just a quick, a visual display, and I hope it helped you all understand what we mean by digital tools a little bit better. And I wanted to end my presentation with a forward-looking thought, which is what would a well-functioning, inclusive digital system look like, and what would we need for that? And you'll notice that, people are a very strong part of creating an inclusive digital system. We do not by any chance mean like we need to automate things. What we've understood is that, and which is why we've also done this presentation using both community volunteers and digital tools, because what we've seen is that both of those things complement each other, and it would be impossible to have one without the other. So that is a point. So I've created a little flow chart that will allow me to go through like a hypothetical situation about how digital tools can be used. And in the middle, I've also identified things that are absolutely necessary to make this inclusive digital ecosystem a reality. So the first thing is that, you have an app, like we just mentioned. It's an inclusive app. It's an app that allows women who are not digitally literate, who might not even be literate, to access it, and they're able to access the information that they want. So let's say that they're able to contact a caseworker because they found that there's an organization that will help them. So now this next step you require is a trained caseworker. And this is a caseworker who will be able to quickly respond to the client. This is a caseworker who will be able to collect all the information she needs online. And so to that end, she can use an online digital case management system where, all of the questions she needs to ask are there, all of the documents she needs to collect are there. So it really helps a caseworker as well to be able to quickly provide service that she needs to provide. And then once she has collected all of the information, then she is able to share it with the right service provider. So let's say that the client in our hypothetical scenario needs legal help, and she also needs to go to the doctor. So the caseworker then is able to quickly identify which lawyer is free, share the information with the consent of the client to the lawyer, or share the information to the doctor, and then be able to then provide the service quickly and effectively to the client. And now, of course, at this point, it's important to mention that the aim is never to completely digitize everything, in the sense that there are some services that you absolutely need to go and physically access. And so I think the best case scenario is that you're able to reduce the dependency on physical visits, because very often you don't need to physically meet somebody, or you do not need to in-person access a service. So I think the idea is to reduce the dependency and not to completely, do away with in-person visits. And so to the extent where services can be provided remotely, for example, a quick online consultation, a quick psychosocial evaluation to be able to understand what the client needs, we'll be able to do that online. And again, the service providers also need to be trained. And a lot of service providers and caseworkers themselves don't have a lot of digital literacy, or are not able to use digital systems very effectively. So it's really important that we continue to train and continue to train the staff who will be helping or providing these services. And finally, the idea is to have a system, a judicial system that is also can be functioning online. So for example, if I want to be filing a case on behalf of my client, I do not need my client to come to my office to give me some documents or to sign an affidavit, but instead everything could be done online. I could send her the documents, she just needs to sign it digitally, I'll take it back, and I myself can file the case online, and then the hearings can happen online, which means that repeatedly the clients will not be required to come to court to present to be present before the court, or to be able to access even small things in the court system. And what we're seeing with the pandemic is that there is a systemic overhaul in terms of a lot of courts, at least in India, that is increasingly moving towards the digital ecosystem. But it's important, I think, and this is the last point, that you have high levels of digital literacy and infrastructure And that is absolutely necessary to ensure that everyone is included in our digital ecosystem. And in fact, without this, what we'll see is that marginalized communities will continue to become more marginalized because their access to justice and their access to systems will continue to be disrupted. So I think the last thought that I want to leave you with is that the digital economy, digital ecosystem is coming in our way, one way or the other. But it's really important that we keep in mind the things that I've spoken about today to ensure that when it does come, it is an inclusive system. It is one that does not leave people behind. So thank you so much for that. That is the end of my presentation. I think we should take a short 5-minute break now. So we could just stay online and we'll be resuming in 5 minutes.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope everybody is back. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, I see a thumbs up. Thank you so much. So, oh, sorry. There we go. Okay, thank you so much for listening to us and being with us for the last 1 hour. Really appreciate that. And we hope it was helpful in terms of understanding the context we work in and the ideas we are trying to share with you all here. Now we have some discussion prompts which Radhika will take you all through, which should hopefully be like an energizing activity for all of us and an opportunity for us to interact with each other. Thank you.
So the first thing I need everybody to do is go to this website that's mentioned on the chat. That's mentioned on the screen. I'll also put it on the chat box so you can use it. So once you go to this website, you have to type the code that is on the screen. So that's 79408568. And we'll give everyone some time to do this so that we are able to, the idea is that you participate in, you're able to click yes, no, and click the option you want to choose. So Tanma, if you could just go one page down. Okay, so should I start sharing my screen? Yeah. Okay, so can you see my screen? Yeah. So basically the first question we have is, are digital tools an effective way to reach the community and to reach communities? And we have 3 options for you. We have a yes, we have no, and we have yes with reservations, which means that you think that it's mostly good, but there are some things that need to be kept in mind. And so I'm going to be, we're going to be watching. So we can see that we have 1 no, we have 3 yeses. And don't worry, I won't take it personally if you think the answer is no, even though I've spent half an hour talking about why it is. And we are also hoping that at the end of this, once we get in more answers, we're able, some of you are able to unmute yourself and share why, even some simple reasons why your answers, why you chose the answer you did. One more yes.
Please let us know if you're having any trouble accessing the link.
Okay, so somebody, the only person who chose no is telling us that it's yes with reservation, and we'll keep that in mind.
Okay. Thank you, Sheila.
Another yes. So we have some answers coming in the chat as well. Yes with reservations. So that's 3 for yes with reservations, none for no, and 5 for yeses. Thank you so much, everyone, for responding to our link. Are there any more answers coming? Okay. So I think we should start the discussion. And if there is anybody else who wants to participate, you can please continue participating. Okay, we just got another one. Yes with reservations. So I think we should start with somebody, telling us why they think the answer, like why they think digital tools are an effective way to reach the community. So somebody who chose yes, if you'd like to share with us, if there's something from your experience that made you choose this answer. The floor is yours, and we really welcome any participation. So we have somebody raise their hand. Could you please unmute yourself and just introduce yourself, and then please share what you wanted to share with us?
Yes, I think yes, someone is raising hand. เจ้าสวัสดีรจนาเจ้าสามารถประกอบความคิดเห็นได้เลยก่อนที่จะเริ่มเลยเดี๋ยวขออนุญาตแป๊บนึงfor because she's loud, so there's an interpretation at the bottom of the icon. You can switch to English and hear what she said. Yes, you will be presenting in loud. Okay, you guys good? You see it? Interpretation icon. Click to English. Okay, เจ้า I think you guys good. All right, เจ้าขออนุญาตรจนาเจ้าเชิญเลย
Yes, please go ahead. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. She has a problem with signal. เจ้ารจนาเจ้าสามารถเริ่มได้เลยเจ้า
Maybe you can ask her to unmute herself first.
Yeah, sorry. เขาติดกันโอเครจนาจะเปิดเสียงแล้วเนาะเพราะตอนนี้ยังอยู่ในโหมดปิดเสียงอยู่เจ้า Maybe the internet is not stable.มีคนอื่นว่า
แม่นเราลงยกมือบ่
อะไรมีคำเห็นบอเซิร์นได้เด้อ
Okay, no problem. Anyone else? May I invite somebody who said yes with reservation? Maybe somebody can throw some light on what those reservations are. Please feel free to unmute yourself and share.
Hi, yeah, I can share a little bit on that.
Yeah.
My main reservation is for people who are not familiar with tech, basically. Yeah, because so I'm part of the Singapore Bar Association charity, and
There's a lot of echo in your voice.
I'm so sorry. Could you hear better now?
The headphones on.
Can you say something again?
Hi, could you hear me now?
Yeah, but it's still echo. Yeah.
There's still echo. It seems like there are multiple devices around you or something.
Maybe I'll just type my answer in the chat.
Okay, yeah, that's also fine. Thanks. Okay, anyone else in the meanwhile? She's going to type out her answer in the chat box because of the audio issue. Anybody else who said yes with reservations or a yes? Would they like to share some more thoughts on that? Like, what are those reservations, for example? Is anybody going to share about any digital tools that they have come across in their countries? which have been effective. Okay, so Marjorie has written that my main reservation is regarding those who are not tech savvy. Correct, yeah. Radhika, do you want to? Okay. In my course of work, as part of the Bar Association's charity that provides legal services, we sometimes encounter individuals who are not familiar with tech or illiterate. Yes, thank you so much, Marjorie. And that is actually one of the biggest challenges while we discuss this. And as Radhika had also, addressed it during her presentation, that this is something which is the biggest hurdle, because while we see it as a convenient tool for the service providers and people who are tech savvy, the beneficiaries, the ultimate beneficiaries might not be tech savvy, might not be digitally literate. So if we do want to make this a reality, the first step is to provide that digital literacy, because it is going to be useful to them, not just for access to justice, but for access to a lot of things in the world going forward. So digital literacy, I think going forward would become one of the basic skill set that people will need to acquire slowly. But yes, you're right, that is one of the biggest hurdles. So if that is something like what we spoke about, the community-based volunteers. So if you're able to train some of the community-based volunteers who are tech savvy, who are able to use the digital tools, then they can further help the community members accessing those services through digital means. I hope that makes sense.
We also saw somebody else raise their hand. I think Sheila had just raised a hand. So why don't you unmute yourself?
Yeah. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Sheila. I'm from the Philippines. Just wanted to say, actually, it's not a no, it's yes with a reservation, because here in the Philippines, we've tried to talk to some community members, having some social media platforms and digital platforms in terms of education or knowing about issues on child protection, child rights, and also using it in terms of reporting cases. My fear is, instead of it being inclusive, this can also exclude those who do not have access to internet and also access to gadgets, phones, smartphones. So also those that don't have the technological literacy in terms of navigating the technology. So I think that's the biggest hurdle that we'll have to face in terms of moving forward with using digital platforms.
Thank you so much, Sheila, for that. I think you've very beautifully encapsulated exactly what even we struggle with in India, which is infrastructure, literacy, and not having access to gadgets. And so we've seen as well that a lot of community spaces might not have access to telecom, proper telecommunication or access to internet, or if they might not have access to a smartphone. So anybody who is really trying to you go forward with digital tools will have to address these issues. So for example, either like having a provision of providing smartphones to their volunteers, which can then be used by other members in the community. And then of course also having tools that are easy to use, that even people who are not digitally literate or who are not literate as well could use with ease. But like you said, that in the absence of this, digital tools will just become more exclusive and will not include marginalized populations. So yes, these reservations, I think, are the same that both Tanima and I also share.
Yeah, and just to add to it, Sheila, you rightly pointed out that the way things stand today, anything going digital is exclusive, and it doesn't really, take into consideration the limitations of the majority of the population, unfortunately, who are not digitally literate or don't have access. And the only way to make it inclusive is to having that bottom to top approach, so that what we discussed today in the first segment of it, where the digital tools themselves are designed to include, are user friendly, and are designed to even cater to people who can't read, so that it has audio features, visual features. So they need to be tailored to address the limitations and the needs of each community. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, anyone else? Like people who want to add something else other than limited digital literacy, please feel free. And as I said, if there is any other digital tools that you know about which have been effective or not effective at all. I mean, in India, we have tons of apps which are, which fail because of limited access, which are not user friendly. They don't really, you make them, you invest a lot of money and resources, but if they are not really user friendly, then they are, just set up for failure sort of a thing. So we see that a lot in our context as well.
I think there is an answer on the chat. So somebody has said that they choose yes, and this is because if we use digital tools, it's much easier to communicate with the community. So it reduces traveling time, it reduces costs, it reduces difficulty of field visits, and of course, communities have to be familiar with these tools. And we couldn't agree more. That has also been our own experience, that these logistical challenges are very key in why digital tools need to be included. And we haven't addressed this, but this becomes even more important at times like in conflict situations where access to communities is absolutely not possible. So I think definitely this provides us a reason why we need to have digital tools, and digital tools that are inclusive. So we may actually be able to, assist and access all communities who want services. Thank you so much for sharing.
Also, what we have realized during our work is that, like a lot of people do have mobile phones, they have smartphones, they use WhatsApp, they do video calls with their family, friends. But what they don't maybe they're not able to imagine is that through those basic things itself, they can also access services. So, just normalizing use of smartphones for for reaching out for help, for digital access to justice is something which is just not, it's just not an idea that people are familiar with. So just so for example, just to share a small instance, like the community we were working with, women do use WhatsApp calls, video calls, even to connect with their family. But once we told them that, okay, let's all get together and have a meeting over Zoom call. Okay. And that was the first time they were all using Zoom. But it was pretty easy for them to quickly just click on the link and then just get on the platform, and they all were on Zoom, and we were all able to meet together for like a short 15-20 minutes meeting. And that itself was such a small thing, but that made them realize that, okay, this is also something we can use for like serious stuff. We can also use this for something which is not leisure. So small things can make them more comfortable with technology, make them more comfortable with using technology for different things.
And I think, Tanuma, that's exactly what even Sheila has written on the chat, because she says that the main challenge is on how we can help in the transition from traditional means of reaching the communities to a more digital form of communication. And that's exactly what even Tanuma was talking about, that, the idea is that it is possible to transition to digital communities and to communication, and to use that as a form of accessing services. And so I think it is our challenge as civil society members to help them with that process.
And also one more thing I want to add in context of sexual and gender-based violence, as well as, marginalized communities. Another advantage of digital tools is that survivors of gender-based violence, specifically with an intersection of them being from marginalized communities, they are usually intimidated by physical spaces of police stations, physical spaces of courtrooms, physical spaces of, a lawyer's chamber. It's also traumatizing for them to meet their perpetrator in person. So all these challenges can also be addressed if things are digitalized, if they have to, face less in-person time with people they are not comfortable with. So for gender-based violence, I feel digital tools can become path-breaking in terms of women being able to access justice, because they can do it from the comfort of their homes, with the comfort of the company of the people in their households. And so that, I think, going forward, if we are able to overcome some of the challenges that we have all discussed, it can be a path-breaking tool to have for gender-based violence.
So I think we are open to, so we've already reached the end of our time, but we are open to having any more comments, or if anyone has any questions, we request you to just stay on for 5 more minutes, or like 2-3 more minutes. And if anyone has any final thoughts, anyone has any comments, we request you to please share that with us. So, we can continue this conversation.
Okay, and if not, thank you so much. We really enjoyed sharing these ideas with you all and hearing your thoughts on this. And really grateful to the organizers for giving us this platform and giving us this opportunity to share our work and interact with everybody here. Thank you so much.
I'd also like to thank the organizers, and I hope that, we see each other in other sessions, and we'll be able to reach out to each other through the course of the next 2 days as well. Okay, thank you so much, everyone.
Okay,
yeah.
and sorry to interrupt, but yeah, I'm afraid someone's going with okay, we have a magic word after the sessions is over. Thank you, our panelists, Radhika and Tanima. We truly appreciate it, and all of our participants as well. Okay, here's your magic word. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.